Our Finance Secretary over these years has had to find the money to make these projects a reality. It's my pleasure, therefore, to introduce our former Finance Secretary, our Education Secretary, our Deputy First Minister, our John, ladies and gentlemen, John Swinney.
Conference. In May of this year, a remarkable thing happened. 9 years after we were first elected to government, we went to the polls, we went to the country to seek a historic third consecutive term in office. Led by Nicola Sturgeon, a leader with a close and direct relationship with our people, we asked the electorate for a new mandate. We set out our record, we promoted our team, we explained our vision of a fair and prosperous nation, and the voters delivered a thumping great victory for the SNP and for Scotland. Friends, the doors that you knocked, the leaflets you delivered, the voters you canvassed and the neighbours you convinced, that's what made our victory possible. It was a victory founded on hard work. It was built on doorsteps the length and breadth of Scotland. It's the greatest strength of this party. Now, don't get me wrong, some would say that our First Minister is our greatest strength, and far be it from me to disagree with that important statement. I wouldn't dream of it. Others will tell you our greatest strength is our vision for the nation, and they're not wrong either. But for me, our greatest strength is born of our roots. We are not a branch office of a UK party. We are... We are neither apologists for a UK government. We draw our strength from every community, every town, every village, every creed and colour in this great nation. Friends, our greatest strength is that we are rooted in all of the communities of Scotland. And last weekend we saw the stark contrast between this country, this party, and those who have a different vision for this nation. Last weekend, while the Tories took to their conference platform to spout forth xenophobic bile, here in Scotland an amazing thing happened. As the week went on, and as the bile poured forth, here people started to tweet about what they loved. They tweeted about their origins, they tweeted about their families, they tweeted about their friends here and in other countries. They stood up to the xenophobes in the best way possible by celebrating the diversity that makes Scotland. They met hate with love, and they made every one of us very proud that we all live here in Scotland. The late dearly missed Bashir Ahmed said it best. He summed up our ethos with this simple statement: it doesn't matter where you come from. What's important is where we're going together as a nation. In the face of the right-wing demagoguery of the Tory Brexit government, it has never been more important that we celebrate that spirit and hold fast to that truth. It's who we are, whether born here or abroad, whatever your creed, whatever your colour, a Scot by birth or a Scot by choice. All of us, every single one of us, are part of our nation. All of us who choose to live here, we are Scotland. Our vision is of an inclusive nation. At the election, we took a positive and vibrant vision of what Scotland can become. In Nicola Sturgeon, we have a First Minister pledged to serve all of Scotland, and we have a government committed to building a fair, equal and prosperous nation with opportunity for all of us to grow and to thrive. Our manifesto set out a plan for reform and transformation. It is a prospectus to fulfil Scotland's massive potential. For Scotland's children, it means a better start in life. And for parents, it means more jobs, better paid jobs, and greater security. For our health and social care services, it means fresh ideas, giving the vulnerable in our society an improved quality of life. For our economy, it means helping all businesses to innovate and to grow, and making sure everyone gets a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. For our country as a whole, it means using new powers over tax and social security to expand our economy and to lift more people out of poverty. But above all else, it means trusting the people of Scotland to make the big decisions about the future of our country. That was our prospectus. Now it is our programme for government. This is the route to create a fair and prosperous Scotland for all in our country. Since 2007, we have transformed education, bolstered our health service, reformed policing, taken employment to new levels, to record levels, and built thousands of affordable homes. Our investment has delivered modern schools, colleges and universities, as well as some of the biggest transport improvements the country has ever seen. Our aim has always been to build a country where strong public services are underpinned by a successful economy. Yes, we are proud of our record, but we know there is still much more to do. That is our task now, to build a better future for Scotland and for everybody who chooses to live and to work here with us in Scotland. Friends, you've just heard from our Cabinet team. The Cabinet Secretary is leading change in all of their portfolios. Angela Constance creating a social security system based on dignity and respect. Fiona Robertson delivering record levels of healthcare to more patients here in Scotland. Michael Matheson delivering a 42-year low in crime. Rosanna Cunningham delivering on our world-leading climate change targets 6 years ahead of schedule. Keith Brown growing the economy despite the headwinds of the Tory Brexit. Fiona Hislop has just arrived from Brussels, where she's been fighting for Scotland's place in Europe, and Fiona will address the conference later this afternoon. And Fergus Ewing is away from conference, fighting for Scotland's rural economy, promoting our fantastic produce to the retailers that can make Scottish food and drink a success. Not for them, party before country. They are SNP ministers, and for us, country comes first. Always country comes first. And friends, before you think I've forgotten someone, I want to say a word about Derek Mackay, our new Finance Secretary. I have, of course, done that job. It's not easy. It gets tougher as the times get tougher. But I know Derek will do a fantastic job as the Finance Secretary in the Scottish Government. But I do have a word of warning for him. I too was once a young-looking Finance Minister with a full head of hair. So be warned, Derek, this is your future. On stage and off stage, this is the team that leads our nation. And at the head of that team is our First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. Acknowledged by friend and foe alike, she has given this party and this country the leadership it needs in some very uncertain times. No one could have been more struck by this than on the morning of the 24th of June. In the wake of the EU referendum result, it was Nicola Sturgeon who stepped up. It was Nicola Sturgeon who laid out a path for Scotland to follow. While Boris and Gove panicked, Cameron resigned and Corbyn went missing, it was Nicola Sturgeon who rejected the xenophobia of Farage, reassured our EU friends here in Scotland and defended our relationship with Europe. In that moment, there was a crisis of leadership in London. Here in Scotland, leadership had its finest hour. And that crisis rolls on in Westminster. Barely a day goes by that the three Brexiteers of Boris, Davis and Fox do not embarrass the whole of the United Kingdom. Theresa May is in office, but it is already obvious that she is not in power. A Remain voter, apparently, she has been driven by the Tory hard right to a hard Brexit, just as David Cameron was driven to a referendum by those self-same hard-right Brexiteers in the first place. The consequences can barely be contemplated. One consequence I will deal with directly today. We as a government have already confirmed tuition fee funding to support EU students studying here or preparing to start here in this year. Now we will extend that guarantee to those EU students wishing to come to start in Scotland in the next year, in 2017-18. And unlike Labour and the Tories, that's tuition-free education. Tuition-free education that we are guaranteeing, not the massive fees they impose on students wherever they come from. But let me go further. We will guarantee their funding. What I demand is that the Tory Brexit government guarantees their right to stay here during their studies and to work here after their studies. These people are not cards to be played. They are fellow human beings. To use them as negotiating chips is obscene, and this party and this SNP government will have none of it. Conference, the Tory Brexit government's threat to people's right to stay here is just another part of the hard right agenda now running rampant at Westminster. And in the face of this ugly Tory Brexit agenda, where stands Labour? Nowhere is the answer. When Jeremy Hunt put foreign-born doctors on notice of deportation, when Amber Rudd announced her sinister list of foreign workers, Labour didn't stand up in defiance. Instead, their press office said the Tories had not gone far enough. Shame, shame, shame on the pathetic Labour Party. Now, there will be some in Labour as horrified as we are at their collective moral failure. Kezia Dugdale tweeted, "Not in my name." But let's be clear. For as long as Kezia Dugdale insists on powers over immigration, Europe and all the rest remaining in London, Kezia shares the blame. I sat in the Smith Commission. I watched as Labour vetoed proposal after proposal from Linda Fabiani and from me to devolve power after power to Scotland. So, Kezia Dugdale, you may say it's not in your name, but I say it is at your hand. And the people of Scotland will never forget that Labour were prepared to allow the Tories to rule Scotland to stop our country deciding on our own future. Friends, make no mistake, we are the National Party, and we will always put the national interests first. We believe in our nation's ability to govern herself, and we believe in our community's abilities to take power into their own hands. We want to reinvigorate local government by reconnecting it with communities. The principle of local control, not on behalf of a community, but by a community, is key. This is at the heart of our programme. We have already launched the review of how school education is governed, setting ourselves the task of making parents and teachers the key decision makers in the life of our schools. Over the coming Parliament, we will go further. We will review the roles and responsibilities of local authorities, and we will look again at the relationships between local authorities and health boards. We aim to achieve nothing less than to transform our democratic landscape, protect and renew public services, and refresh the relationship between citizens, communities and councils. We do this not because it is radical, and it is, but because we believe it is right. We don't do it because it's easy, it's not, but because it is in the national interest. We believe that national interest lies in placing power in the hands of the people of this country. It is why I believe in independence. Just as we believe the best people to decide the future of our country are those who live here, so we believe the best people to decide the future of our communities are the people who live in those communities. We will trust the people to make the decisions about their future. That is our creed, and that is the truly radical path of this Scottish National Party government. After the election, I was given the enormous privilege of becoming the Education Secretary at the request of the First Minister. The task the First Minister has given to me is simple: to raise the bar for all and to close the attainment gap for our poorest pupils. And our ambition is equally straightforward. We will make significant progress in closing the gap within the next Parliament and substantially eliminate it within a decade. It may be a simple objective, it may be a straightforward aim, but it will not be easy. We do not underestimate the scale of our ambition. We do not underestimate the destructive force of poverty. We know the damage it does to the life chances of our youngest, poorest children. I believe the single best route out of poverty is education. I believe the single most powerful weapon we have to fight poverty is education. We will bring the whole education system together behind our purpose: the expansion of childcare to 30 hours per week, the focus on school education unreservedly on learning and teaching, the widening of access to university, the strengthening of apprenticeships, the linking of college to the world of work. All will come together in the same national mission: to free every single child from the burden of poverty. I will give it, I promise you, my relentless focus. I will not rest until we have delivered the best possible future for every single young person in our country. Friends, 9 years ago, we set out on a journey in government. We have come a long way. The people of our country have asked us to go further, to make Scotland stronger. That is our task. That is our pledge. Our promise to Scotland is this: this SNP government will build a fair, equal and a prosperous Scotland. Thank you very much.
I'm going to invite a number of MPs to join us, but who better to give the report and the update from our Westminster group than the new Deputy Leader of the Scottish National Party. Please welcome Angus Robertson MP.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, thank you. Conference, it's a huge honour to be able to report on the work of the SNP at Westminster, the strong, the united, the effective opposition to the Tories in the House of Commons. Make no doubt that with Labour in disarray, it's only the SNP that will stand up for Scotland against this right-wing Tory UK government. And indeed. And as we sought the votes of the people of Scotland in last year's general election, we promised then that we would be stronger for Scotland, and that is exactly what we have done. If you hadn't already noticed, it's SNP MPs who are leading from the front when it comes to the campaigns and to the causes that really, really matter. An example: Ian Blackford took up the cause of the Brain family, Greg, Catherine and their son Lachlan, who moved to Dingwall in 2011 on Catherine Brain's student visa and who wanted to stay and to contribute to Scotland. But were told by the UK government that they weren't welcome here. Ian was a formidable opponent to this patent nonsense from the Home Office, And working with our Scottish Government and our First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, Ian was successful in his campaign to win the right for the brains to stay. I am very, very proud that we have MPs like Ian fighting for the people of Scotland, and I am very proud that Greg, Catherine and Lachlan are with us at the SNP Conference today. Let us show the Brain family a warm SNP Conference welcome. Now, it's not all been good news stories. World conflict has led to an unprecedented displacement of people that is now a huge global challenge. And SNP MPs Joanna Cherry and Stewart McDonald have been at the forefront of efforts to pressure the UK government to do more to help alleviate the humanitarian crisis. There are almost 90,000 refugee children in Europe alone without their families. But the UK government would not commit to putting a number on how many children they would give a home in the UK. Joanna and Stewart have visited the camp at Calais and seen the kids affected by this crisis. They have been relentless in their efforts to secure protection for these children, and I know that they will continue their hard work to ensure that the UK government takes a more humane approach to this crisis. Just last week, SNP MPs delivered petitions to the House of Commons supporting thousands of women in Scotland who will be affected by the UK government's unfair pension changes. When Mary Black took up the cause of the WASPI women, she delivered one of the most impassioned speeches in the House of Commons. She rightly accused this Tory government of the wrong priorities, of choosing to find billions of pounds for new nuclear weapons instead of choosing to provide some security and dignity to women in their retirement. It's Mary Black and the SNP that have put fair solutions on the table, and the UK government must act. Conference, we will never stop fighting for a fairer deal for the WASPI women, and please show your appreciation to them and to Mary Black. And Conference, I think we have to contrast the hard work of SNP MPs with what can only be called the shambles of the Labour Party. As David Cameron sought approval for a bombing campaign in Syria, it was the SNP that secured and led the cross-party opposition to the plans, whilst Labour fought with itself. And as Labour let the Tories away with writing a blank cheque for the renewal of Trident, it was the SNP that had been the principled opposition in Parliament. When Labour had the opportunity to vote down the Tories' austerity charter, they were found wanting, and only the SNP have been clear and consistent in our opposition to Tory austerity. And as we approach next month's autumn statement, the SNP will continue to argue for an end to austerity that is damaging economic growth and public services, for meaningful fiscal stimulus to mitigate against the impact of leaving the European Union, and tangible support for our oil and gas industry. This is the Brexit recovery plan that the UK government must deliver. Indeed, an effective opposition to the Tories is more important now than ever before. Conference, we are in a bleak Brexit Britain, and we are in the eye of the storm, and there is worse, much, much worse still to come. In contrast to the work taken by our First Minister and the Scottish Government to reassure EU nationals living in Scotland, the UK Government has referred to them as cards to be bargained with. How shameful. How shameful. The UK government's plans to name and shame firms by making them reveal what proportion of their workforce is foreign is deplorable, it is xenophobic. And as the First Minister says, the fact that they now want to keep this information in secret lists will be of no consolation to anybody. And as much as Theresa May wants to run and hide from her record, how can we forget? How can anybody forget her infamous Go Home Foreigners vans? It is a disgrace that race and religious hate crime has increased in some parts of the UK by over 40%. And Conference, let us be clear that those politicians that fuel a climate of xenophobia with their damaging policies and their reckless words must accept their share of responsibility for this. The SNP will always stand up against prejudice and hatred and stand by those EU nationals that do us the honour of making Scotland their home and make such a valued contribution to our society. And so, Conference, that is why today I can confirm that the SNP will be using our Opposition Day debate in the House of Commons next week to demand that the UK government end this unacceptable situation right now and give EU nationals a cast iron guarantee that their status will be protected. I'm proud, as I know you all are, that Scotland is a welcoming and outward-looking country. There are thousands of EU nationals who study at our universities, and they make up around 5% of the NHS workforce in Scotland. EU citizens who come to live and work in Scotland are also critical to key sectors of our economy. In Scotland, where employment is high, we require more people to come and work in Scotland and help our economy prosper. Over 12% of the people who work in our agricultural sector and 11% of people who work in our food, fish and meat processing sector are EU citizens. Conference, those who come to live and work in Scotland contribute to our economy. They make us richer and more diverse. Scotland is their home and they are welcome here. On the issues that matter to Scotland, the Tories aren't listening. When they sought the votes of the people of Scotland to take us out of the EU, they made all kinds of promises that more powers currently held by the EU would come to Scotland. But in Westminster, the Tory Environment Minister told us, and I quote, "These policies are devolved now, but the general consensus is that there needs to be a UK-wide framework." Aha. Conference, this is not just failing to meet their promise. The Tories are now talking about reverse devolution, about taking powers away from Scotland as part of their Brexit power grab. And in her conference speech, Theresa May said that there will be no opt-out from Brexit. She said the UK government would negotiate its departure from the EU as one United Kingdom, and we will leave the European Union as one United Kingdom. And Ruth Davidson, the Scottish Tory leader, reiterated that Scotland has no veto over the UK leaving the EU. This is despite being told in 2014 that we were an equal partner in this United Kingdom. It's time now for Theresa May to prove it. Scotland's membership of the single market of 500 million people is vital to Scotland's interests. With a significant rural economy, retaining access to cap payments really matters. With a reputation for punching above our weight in research, ensuring access to competitive research funding and the global collaborations that flow from it matter. For a country that needs to grow its population to help address skills gaps and deal with an ageing population, free movement of people matters. All of that is now at risk, and it will be the people who pay the price of this in real life, in jobs, in investments and living standards, and they will suffer as a result. Take our financial services sector. Scotland has a distinguished history in banking that dates back over 300 years. We are one of Europe's leading financial centres and the second financial hub in the UK outside London. Over 150,000 people in Scotland are employed in financial services. The success of this industry, which brings big jobs and big revenue to Scotland, relies upon our membership of the single market. We cannot allow that to be threatened by the reckless behaviour of Theresa May and her right-wing Tory government. But there is an alternative. The alternative conference is economic vandalism. The report by the Fraser of Allender Institute, published last week, made for spine-chilling reading. The real impact of leaving the EU is between 30 and 80,000 Scottish jobs lost, and our GDP being 5% lower. It's clear that the Tories represent a clear and present danger to Scotland's interests. Theresa May says that options for keeping Scotland in the EU are impractical, that we've had our referendum, and that there will be a UK approach to Brexit. She refuses to accept that for Scotland, for us, remain means remain. My message to the Prime Minister is this. If you continue to ignore the expressed will of the people of Scotland, if you refuse to even consider how we might protect Scotland's place in the EU, then be in no doubt, your days as Prime Minister of a United Kingdom are numbered. So, Conference, let our message to the people of Scotland be this. Whether you voted yes or whether you voted no in 2014, and whether you voted Remain or whether you voted Leave in 2016, we know that you just want what is best for you, best for your community, best for Scotland. And in addressing all of Scotland's people, 100% of this country, regardless of where you come from, we will put all of your interests first. That is our promise to you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I take my leave.
Thank you very much, Angus. I'll put you in the very capable hands of John Nicolson MP, who's going to conduct this session for a discussion with your MPs. So please welcome John Nicolson.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Derek, and thank you, Conference. I've said this before, but you've no idea how thrilling it is for those of us who are MPs to hear that curiously progressive noise, this. Because, of course, we have to put up with what Mary Black once memorably called weird donkey braying noises. And it's a curious thing, sometimes, I don't know if this has happened to you, do you sometimes, guys, do you find this just happens to you sometimes, and you sometimes find yourself going, wah, wah, wah? No?
Never.
No,
That's only you, John. That's a medical condition.
no, that's... That's, I'm afraid, what I was fearing. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to my shy, self-deprecating colleagues here on the stage, beginning, of course, with Stewart McDonald from Glasgow South. Dr. Philippa Whitford from Central Ayrshire. Now, it's not a cheering contest.
I'm winning.
Yeah, if you want to cheer more, you know.
Kirsty Blackman from Aberdeen North. Just as well Callum McCaig wasn't on stage there. Drew Hendry from Inverness, Nairn, Badenoch and Strathspey. And that's our panel. Now, can I begin with you, first of all, Kirsty? I mean, the most important thing, really, that's happened to you in recent weeks is overtaking Callum McCaig in Twitter followers.
It was my life's work. But I've now done it, you know, and so I can rest on my laurels. That's it.
But you had to trade Twitter followers. You had to follow tens of thousands of people to get a few thousand back to overtake him. But we won't dwell on that, because the main thing, of course, that people have read about recently is your extreme bad behaviour in the House of Commons, because you had the effrontery to bring your children to Parliament. What was going on?
I don't know if any of you have seen what happened in the Icelandic Parliament this week when one of the MPs was breastfeeding while speaking. And
very good.
I think that's what a progressive, forward-looking Parliament looks like. The Parliament at Westminster is not progressive and it's not forward-looking. It's incredibly traditional, and some of the standing orders and rules were made 300 years ago and haven't changed. So I took my children to a public meeting. The Westminster summer recess dates don't take into account of Scottish school holidays because only English MPs are important. I mean, so there, you know, every parent during the summer holidays has got childcare issues. They've got issues with trying to juggle and trying to find out. And I had one of those problems, so I took my kids to Parliament. And there's not a creche. There's a nursery in Parliament, which is good if you want to put your children in for 6 weeks. But they won't take your children for one afternoon. So I took my children to select committee, which was allowed. It was a public meeting. It was fine. They were quiet. They sat at the back.
But it's the problem isn't just taking the kids in. You're allowed to do that.
Yes.
If the kids sit silently, that's okay.
Yes.
It's the touching the children that's the problem.
It is. There was no issue at all until I picked my daughter up. And then I was told that I wasn't allowed to have a sleeping child at the table.
And you should have left your child to lie on the floor and cry.
I should have left her to lie on the floor, well, asleep, possibly.
Asleep.
So, you know.
It's so bizarre, isn't it? And that's the kind of thing that we really feel we have to change to make it a modern, as long as we're there, we want it to be a modern, progressive place. And when we leave, we want to leave it as a modern, progressive place for parliamentarians.
Having benefited it, yeah.
I think it would be easier for Parliament and for governments to make a difference in the workplace if they were able to say, look at the good things that we are doing, we can do it as employers, why are you not doing it as employers?
So what was the answer? What did they say to you? Why were you not allowed to pick up your Wayne?
Because she was classed as a stranger. And you're not allowed to have strangers at the table.
And did somebody look at you with a straight face and say, you've got a stranger baby? I mean, how did they explain it to you?
The clerk came over and said, you can't have your child at the table. And I said, are you kidding? And she said, no, really? So there was quite a lot of, I just couldn't believe it. I didn't know that. It's one of those rules in Westminster that you don't know about and you find out about when you do something wrong.
Because there's so many things like that, isn't there? You know, nobody teaches you where you're meant to sit.
You're not allowed to wear a hat in the chamber unless you're female. The men are not allowed to wear a hat, but the women are. There's a rule that
Stewart McDonald came badly unstuck on that, actually, in the first couple of weeks. It is indeed absolutely odd, isn't it? Well, thank you for the moment. Dr. Philippa, you also got into trouble, didn't you? But this time you got into trouble with some of the press, because as I recall, Dr. Philippa, who, for those of you who don't know her, and I can't imagine there's anybody in that condition, but for those of you who don't know her, Dr. Philippa is a distinguished breast cancer surgeon, and in order to keep her hand in, she goes off and works on the holidays. That's what you need to do to keep registered. But one of the papers said that she was moonlighting by doing operations. Is that right?
Yes, it was particularly last Christmas and New Year, and we only had the 2 weeks, the Christmas week, New Year week, off. And obviously I'd swanned off to London. One of my colleagues was on maternity leave, and that just left two, and one of them took very ill. and was off work for several months, which left one. And she was planning, naturally enough, to finally have a break over Christmas and New Year, which was going to leave my hospital with actually no breast clinics and no breast operating. So I kind of grudgingly agreed to do 5 days to help out. And then in January, I got contacted by a paper in Scotland that shall remain nameless. And it took me about 10 minutes on the phone to understand you're doing this as a hashtag SNP bad story. And yes, they did. Top SNP MP moonlights in the NHS.
Which was a bad thing. Which was a bad thing. But then shortly afterwards, I read another headline that said, moonlighting Dr. Philippa, a hero for working in Gaza during holidays.
I'm just not very good at holidays, if you ask my husband.
But you've made the issue of health, of course, your central concern, because you are shadow health spokesperson. Now, one of the things I love watching is when Dr. Philippa stands up opposite Jeremy Hunt. Oh, yeah. And you see the beads of perspiration on non-Dr. Hunt's face. No. And I always think of Burns, wee, timorous, sleek it, coor and beastie.
Well, I mean, obviously, things that have taken up a huge amount of my time south of the border has been the junior doctor strike. And, you know, a lot of this comes out of real fear and misery. They have 1 in 10 jobs are not filled. We are short, UK-wide, of doctors. And then he decides last year to pick an absolute fight based on misleading information, misuse of research, and basically pulled out a pin and threw the grenade at the profession. And then one of the things we had this week, which, I mean, you all saw that Tory conference, was the shocking language that was used last week of talking about expanding medical students. I totally approve of that. We need more doctors, but so that they could replace foreign doctors. Now, I'm sorry, we'll never replace foreign doctors. We will always need more, and some of them come here to learn and eventually to go home. And it was just xenophobic nonsense. So how are they going to fill those 1 in 10 jobs? That's what I'd like to know.
And I'm guessing, Philippa, one of the real frustrations is if you happen to know what you're talking about, that's often a disadvantage in the Commons. And where Angus, I think, has played a blinder is he's chosen people, hasn't he, to do positions who actually know about their subject matter. And of course, because none of us expected to be elected a year, well, 2 years ago now.
Speak for yourself.
You know, we've all had previous careers, and what he's tried to do is slot people in to positions where they know their subject matter. It must be very frustrating for you. Well, actually, I sit and listen to you muttering with fury on the benches.
But I don't make animal noises. I just mutter.
Yeah. It must be very frustrating for you when you know, because you're a doctor, you know about the pressures, you know about the detail, you've got the experience there, and Jeremy Hunt looks you in the eye and he says that black is white.
Yeah, absolutely.
It must make you want to scream.
It does, but I'm a doctor. I'm used to dealing with stress, crisis, mental health issues. I just keep calm. I stay in the zone. And occasionally I resort to my key weapon, which is my cross voice. And I do use that. But I think, you know, what John says is absolutely true. And we do actually get positive comments from other parties. You know, we started out 56 of us, and they say, where did you find all these people? Because more than half of us are not career politicians. We're like me, we're in off the street, and we bring a life experience with us. And the clever thing, as John says, is that Angus has put people in briefs. So we don't just go with some notes or some written speech. We'll have worked in that business, and that's something none of the other parties can match.
Drew, I noticed that the narrative has changed. Do you remember when we were first elected and we went down to Parliament, some of the papers were saying, look at them, they're out of control, they're sitting anywhere in the Commons. They're not sitting in their allocated seats. They're refusing to use their sword hooks. Some of them are eating chips. How will poor Nicola control them? And that has morphed seamlessly into a new narrative, which is they turn up on time, they work incredibly hard, they're obviously scarcely human, they're robots controlled by Nicola. Your microchip that's been fitted, how are you finding it?
Well, it's very comfortable. You talked about the sword hook. I decided to hang a pen on mine because I think the pen's mightier than the sword. I think you've got all the parliamentary bad kids here. I think we've all broken rules down there. I've certainly been caught out a few times. It's an incredibly weird place. It's like Groundhog Day in a ski village on most days. But
getting your microchip fitted, of course, costs a bit more because of the constituency that you live in. The delivery charges were expensive to get it there. He shoehorned into the discussion. And that's something you've been fighting very hard about because you represent a Highland constituency. You're the first high-profile MP to hold the seat, as we all know. This is a problem that should have been sorted out a long time ago. Why do you have to pay so much more to get goods and services delivered to the Highlands? It's not that far away.
It's not, John. And one of the issues that goes across my brief is that for too long, Scotland's been at the back of the queue when it comes to getting a fair deal. Nowhere is that more obvious than on delivery charges. And I was pleased to be able to take forward the first bill of its kind to introduce a bill for fair delivery charges, to mean that when you see adverts that say free delivery to the UK mainland, that doesn't mean that, there's a wee asterisk there that says, but it'll be 90 quid to deliver your mobile phone to Nairn, or that somehow Inverness or other parts of Perth or other parts of the borders are not actually in the mainland. They're somehow floated off into the sea. So delivered that bill. Unfortunately, it got talked out by the parliamentary rules, but I'm going to bring it back in the consumer bill that's coming through the Parliament soon.
Talking out bills. Talking out bills, for those of you who don't know about this obscure business, is that if you introduce a bill, one of the almost always Tory backbenchers will stand up and talk about trees in Serbia or whatever, and will keep the discussion going for as long as is humanly possible so that your very important bill doesn't get the chance to progress to the next stage. Am I right?
That's correct, yeah.
And it's a weird system. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, who tried to talk out your bill, and why did they try and talk it out?
Well, what happens is all these bills get put onto one day. Usually it's a Friday, and they're given a very limited amount of time. So it's actually a general number of the Tory and sometimes Labour MPs who don't want to see these things happen, that actually go and talk through at length on the early numbers of the bill so that you just run out of time with it.
I've got a special interest in this myself because a week today, because I came top of the private members' ballot, I didn't have to do anything to achieve this. They just put little balls into a jar, and once pulled out, I came first. It's the first time this has happened to any SNP Member of Parliament since we arrived in the 1940s. And I have introduced a bill which will pardon gay men who are found guilty of a crime which is no longer a crime. And it was a funny thing, you know, when I chose the bill, I was called into the Whip's office, the Tory Whip's office, and it's off the central lobby. No SNP Member of Parliament had ever been there, I suspect, before. And you go down a long corridor hung with posters of some of your favourite people, you know, Norman Tebbit, Margaret Thatcher, in their prime. And the Whips came forward and they said, Mr. Nicolson, if you go forward with this bit of progressive legislation, we promise you, on behalf of the Conservatives, there'll be no tricks, no games, we will support you. And I said, I feel as if I'm in an episode of The House of Cards here. But the proof of the pudding is in the eating, because a week today, my bill will come before the House of Commons, and it will bring closure, I hope, to generations of gay men who were arrested for crimes, inverted commas, that we today would think are utterly ludicrous. And our MPs will be there en masse voting for it. We've been promised Labour support, we've been promised Conservative support, and what we've got to hope is no one tries to talk it out. So watch this space. Stewart McDonald. Last but by no means least. Stewart, you've made the running on lots of very important transport stories. You've a special interest in lorries yourself, I know, and other transport. I tease him about lorries, but he does love a good truck. But the story that you've managed to get into the papers and have done so well with is Volkswagen.
Yes.
Tell us about what you've been doing at Volkswagen, because you have shown what MPs can do when they work hard on an issue, get the story into the papers and champion the consumer.
Yeah, well, obviously, most people will know about the emissions fixing scandal that has engulfed Volkswagen all around the world.
No, they might not. Tell us.
Well, basically what was happening, this is very technical, so I won't go into all the detail, but basically they were saying their cars were much more energy efficient and much better for the environment than they actually were. And so were sold on a false basis. And we've watched countries all around the world, in South America, Australia, America itself, take action against Volkswagen, whilst the UK government has literally sat on its hands the entire time. And the platform I've used has been the select committees, and the select committees are really interesting to watch, particularly the lorry committee, John, if you don't mind. And that's where you can really interrogate them. So I've been banging away at this for about a year, and finally the government have said they are now exploring options for legal action, but they've been dragged kicking and screaming to that position.
And this affects, of course, I used to be a reporter on Watchdog at one point, and this affects large numbers of people, and the sense of huge frustration people have, not knowing whether their vehicle's safe or not, the government dragging its feet, and knowing that across the world other governments are being an awful lot tougher. So Volkswagen runs rings round our government down at Westminster while knuckling under, am I right, to other governments?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think the thing people just don't like is this idea of big corporations scamming them and getting away with it. I think that's wrong. And we've had another situation with Vauxhall, with Zafira cars randomly going on fire. And I tell you, I did a survey over the summer of people affected by this. And almost all of the over 1,000 responses I got were from people in England. And let me tell you, people in England are just so amazed and thankful that it's an SNP MP that's taken this up for them. Because lots of them come from these kind of Tory shires where they're just not interested in challenging their own side.
One thing all of us have in common, I imagine, is the number of emails we get from people in English constituencies who say, can you tell me how I can join the SNP and can I vote for the SNP? So looking forward, what are the things that we are most energised about looking ahead? I mean, for me, just exactly as Angus said there, it is looking after European Union citizens who feel this enormous sense of uncertainty. It's a massive issue, not least for you, Dr. Philippa, because your man's a foreigner.
Yes, my husband, Hans, is German, has worked in our NHS for 30 years and kind of downloaded the application for British citizenship, but at the moment has just left it in the in-tray to think about. But the way people have been treated, there's 130,000 EU nationals, and far more than that from around the world, who have lived and worked here and settled exactly as Angus said. And the problem is that they've been hanging here for 4 months, not given any security, and to be using them in a bargain is impossible. And the idea that our NHS, either in Scotland, England, or any of the UK nations, could survive without them is just ludicrous, ungrateful, and xenophobic.
And Drew, one of the weird things, I think, when you listen to the debate is, I mean, somebody said to me in London recently that they thought that 40% of people living in the United Kingdom were from the European Union. It was a man in a shop. Because they're so London-centric often. And you might think that in parts of London, but from a constituency like yours, which has been artificially depopulated for all the reasons we know, the Highland clearances, which still have a visual and social effect in Scotland, you need people, we all need people in Scotland to come here because people are living longer, there are greater demands on the National Health Service. We need people, we need energetic folk who want to become new Scots to settle, not least in constituencies like yours.
No, absolutely, and for too long we've seen the drain, particularly of young people, and it's so valuable to have European citizens coming to the Highlands and Islands to work in our communities. I mentioned ski villages earlier. We've got a wonderful ski village in Aviemore, which wouldn't be able to function in its wonderful tourist proposition without the help of the people who come to support our tourism economy. So we need that across the Highlands and Islands, but for the same reasons, the health service in the Highlands also needs foreign citizens, it needs EU nationals, we need that diversity to keep us healthy and to keep us moving forward. And we really value the people who are our friends and neighbours, who've chosen to make their lives with us. That's a privilege that we should embrace. And I'm glad to see that's a message that's coming out of this party and this conference.
And Kirsty.
It's good for the gene pool as well.
And Kirsty, of course, as an Aberdeen MP, you've seen the benefits that people who come from all across the world have brought to Aberdeen and to the oil economy, which has been so important for Scotland, though sadly we haven't always benefited as much as we should have done over the decades. But you've seen that firsthand.
Yeah, absolutely. Aberdeen's always been really multicultural. We've always had loads of people coming from across the world to take part in the oil industry and to contribute to our economy. You know, our hotels, our shops, our local communities have seen the benefit of the direct impact of the money coming in, not so much the indirect impact as the tax goes to Westminster and is top sliced before it's allowed to come back to any of it's allowed to come back to us. I think going forward, the oil and gas stuff is really, really important, not just in terms of Brexit and how when the UK exits the EU, how that's going to be protected, but in terms of making sure that our industry is talked up rather than talked down. You know, we're going through a dip in terms of the price just now, but actually oil and gas is going to be around for many, many, many years into the future, certainly out to at least 2040. We're still going to be a hub for oil and gas, and we need to make sure that people know that and that people are positive about the oil industry and that those jobs are kept and secured in our local area.
I'm going to leave the last word of our Westminster discussion to Stewart, because Stewart is Stewart is a passion. We're in Stewart's home turf. We're in Glasgow, beautiful Glasgow, and Stewart is a passionate Glasgow nationalist and talks about Glasgow at every turn, as indeed he should as the Member of Parliament for Glasgow South. Glasgow needs foreigners, doesn't it? You wander around the centre of Glasgow, areas of Glasgow which have become so depopulated, and we need to build Glasgow up, don't we? And for Glasgow, tourism is vital.
Absolutely, and I know you know my interest in tourism to Glasgow. But you know, almost all of the tourism that comes to the UK goes to London, and we want to pull people up here to Glasgow. If there's anyone from Edinburgh, you can go now. But what I think the ambition has to be as we move forward is Glasgow from being the second city of the empire to the first city of Europe. I think that's my ambition as a Glasgow MP, that is a major hub for bright, energetic, enthusiastic people to come to Glasgow from all over Europe, all over the world, and turn us into that big, dynamic European city that I know particularly our council group, who hopefully are going to win here in May in the local elections, I know that's an ambition that they share as well.
Well, I'd like to say thank you very much indeed for you all for attending our, not quite Westminster, our Westminster half an hour. It's been a great pleasure to chair it. And a big round of applause to my friends and colleagues here.
Well done.